If you are struggling with doing all the things, feeling overwhelmed, feeling stuck, well, today you are going to love our guest, Deirdre. Not only is she providing a tool for podcasters that truly made it so I could double my business without doubling my workload, she's also sharing what is working and what is not working for podcasters that are actually profiting from their podcast. So if you are ready to take your podcast to the next level, make some money, and have some fun, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Cure for Pod Fade. I am so excited you found your way here because that means you know how powerful podcasting can be. You are ready to build a legacy with your unique story, your message, and your offer, but you're getting a little overwhelmed. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling stuck. You just don't know how to grow your show, find a new audience, and make some money. Podcasting can be the ticket to the life of your dreams, and it doesn't have to be as hard as you think. We're talking about all the ingredients it takes to be a successful, profitable podcaster without that icky overwhelm, because you are too magical to join the 85% plus club that pod fades away. I'm your host, Jen Dragonette, so let's make podcasting easy peasy lemon squeezy. So welcome to the podcast. I'm going to call you my friend and person who has helped me double my business. And I'm like, can I say any more? I'm like, just a fun person to hang out with in person. Like, I could go on and on, but welcome to the podcast, Deirdre. I am like, yay, this needed to happen. And I'm so excited.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me here. I feel like I am in great company because you have just been crushing it with all the things that you do.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because we don't always feel that way, right?
No, it's true. It was really funny actually yesterday. Ash Bonner, my co-founders, and I, we were having a discussion. We were having a chat, and we've been down on ourselves. I'm not going to lie, for the past few weeks because we've launched 2.0, and with that has come a lot of bugs, a lot of anyway with CapShow, and it's really easy for us to just get down on the negative things that just happen, and we're trying our best, to make this thing like the best thing ever for people. And it literally is, but we get in our heads about this stuff sometimes, right? And then when you think about all the things that you've been able to accomplish, when you step back and you go and you look at it, you're not in that micro moment when you get like a live chat support ticket come through and all these, in those moments it's like, oh, I feel like such a failure. But then when you step back and you look at it, we not just captured like you as like all of us, right? We've collectively just achieved so much. So, Jen, I totally know what you mean when you say it doesn't feel like you're crushing it, but trust me, you are.
And see, from the outside and being a user. Okay, so first off, let's just back up because CapShow is the best thing for any podcaster out there. If you are a producer, if you are a manager, or if you're somebody who produces your own show, you need it in your life. Like, period, end of story. Yes, there's a lot of other things out there. And I'm sorry to the guests that are going to be on the show in the future, but you guys are way behind the times. Like, CapShow is the place to be. And I'd like you to just tell us like a little, like, I'm sure you could say it better than me, other than like, oh my goodness, you need this in your life. It will save you hours and hours and hours. This is how I produce 17 to 27 episodes a week.
Wow.
You need this in your life.
Yes. Okay. So CapShow is literally the fastest way to market and grow a podcast, as Jen knows. So what we do is we create all of the written marketing copy that surrounds a podcast. So we're talking, so our users upload their audio file or video file now, and in under 10, 15 minutes, we create the title, the episode title, description, podcast website content, full transcript, social media captions, email, blog post, LinkedIn article, YouTube description. We pulls out quotes, and we have even more exciting things that we're working on too. But it does everything you can think of from a marketing perspective to really amplify your message. CapShow does.
Yes. And it does it in a way that I know that there's like all these other trends out, and I won't name all the other softwares, but they don't have what you guys have. You guys really make it, for me, easy as somebody that's producing. Again, this is one of the things I think is part of pod fade, is it's hard to create all of what you just said. It is so time consuming, and we normally don't have that kind of time. But what CapShow gives to you, it's minor tweaks, not total rewrites that you're getting from all these other softwares. And I can't say enough about how amazing it is, and how I truly think it's part of the cure for pod fade.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And that was a big reason why we created it. Honestly, I'm a podcaster myself. I have been for the past like 3 or so years. And CapShow was an answer to a problem that we were facing, which is how do we know how powerful podcasts can be. I think that's why, people are listening to this show being like, I want to ensure that A, I get my podcast started, but B, that when I do, I don't fall into the trap of the majority of statistics that we hear that where, 80, 90% of people actually pod fade, because it's not an easy thing. It sounds like an easy thing, right, to do, to set up a podcast. And, when you look at it, it is, but the hard thing comes in actually keeping yourself motivated. And the only way that you can keep yourself motivated is if you can see progress, right? Humans, like we're all, especially entrepreneurs, we're all about progress. That's what juices us. And progress can mean more listeners. It can be more revenue. It can mean that you're just feeling like you're finally getting the word about what it is that you do out there. That's how I felt when I started my podcast. And it was like, nothing. I had no traction, no listeners. I was like, I don't know why in the world I'm doing this. Why am I spending all this time recording for what? And what that made me realize was that growing a podcast is very much like growing a business. You have to actually very intentionally market it. And so when I kind of figured that out, like, I was, okay, well, how would I grow a business? Let's apply that to my podcast. That meant content, and that meant like actually creating relationships. And that meant all these things that CapShow does a lot of the heavy lifting, maybe not the creating relationships part, but definitely the content part of it. It does so much of that heavy lifting so that it doesn't take you a lot of time. Doesn't burn you out either. So that's why we created CapShow.
Yeah. And magic. Everybody needs it. Definitely links will be in the show notes. But I think you bring up a good point that I want to go back to, is that we think we can start a podcast and if you build it, they will come. And we forget about the marketing aspect. I'm going to raise my hand because, hey, like I forgot that I needed to market my show for 3 years.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to marketing, you did some really specific research about how a lot of us might think we're marketing, but we're actually using the wrong tools and the wrong strategies. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I did a report, and it was in conjunction with like the likes of Squadcast and Podbean and Listen Notes and Grow the Show and Alitu, for example. We actually co-authored this report, and it went into what is it that higher income podcasters are doing, and what are lower income podcasters, what they're doing from a marketing perspective. And it was really, really interesting to see because, I tell this story all the time, but, when I first started, and we always default to social media, right? That's the easiest thing. It's low barrier to entry. It's very visible. It's a thing that we all intuitively go to and see. And so we're like, okay, as long as we post about our podcast on social media, it's going to blow up. And if anyone's listening to this, whoever's listening to this, you would know that is not true. That is not the case. I figured that out myself too, because I fell into that trap. And what's so interesting is that that is essentially the main place that lower income podcasters are spending a lot of their time on. They're spending a lot of their time on social media, whereas higher income podcasters are being way more intentional about how it is that they use their content. So they are way more intentional being on, like they have a blog post, like a blog website. So they are actually being very intentional around SEO and discoverability from a search perspective. Way more intentional about building and leveraging a newsletter, an email list. Very intentional about what platforms that they focus on. So, it kind of makes sense. I actually did a whole episode with Kevin Schmidlin, who's the founder of Grow the Show, who was also part of this report, and we spoke about why our hypothesis about why LinkedIn was such a it was the main platform that the high income podcasters are leveraging. And when you think about those pieces, you go, it's very different. They're not just leveraging the Instagrams and the TikToks and the things that we just hear so much buzz about, but the buzz is kind of creating saturation as well. And that's where everyone's on. So do you want to be where everyone's on and trying your, hardest to cut through that noise? Or do you want to just carve out your own place on the internet where your ideal audience can find you? That is the smartest way to go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. And I didn't know that. And when I heard that, my heart sunk. And I'm sure the listeners out there are like, oh crap, I've just been spending so much time trying to get people off of the metaverse or TikTok into my show. And one of the things I realized after being in your space is hey, that's a great place to maybe nurture them after they're listeners. But it's definitely not the way to grow my show. Period. Yes. End of story. I've stopped trying that. And I think that this is, it goes into everything that you've done. Because I know you've had I've seen the many podcasts that you've launched.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've seen the many pivots that you've taken, and you've really created this new thing because you saw a hole in the market. And I love that. So tell me a little bit about how after this report, it shifted your business and your way to grow your podcast.
Oh, completely. I am going all in. So basically I was killing myself and my team on Instagram and TikTok. Actually, that's a funny thing. We were literally on the two platforms. We were really focused on the two platforms that, that's what lower income podcasters are focusing on. And it burnt us out, to the point that I actually had a team member leave because she was just like, this is just too much. And when that report came out, I was like, it was such a relief almost. I think that's what you said, because I could be like, I'm going to give myself permission to not have to be on all platforms and to not have to do all of the things that the gurus, quote unquote, tell us that we need to be doing. And so if you look at my Instagram profile, I barely I think the last post was maybe a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. I'm barely on there. TikTok, I've not posted for probably close to a year now. Or maybe that's just in my time. I don't know. It might just actually be a couple months. I actually can't tell time anymore. I've really gone all in on LinkedIn and Facebook. And LinkedIn because that is a way more professional place to be. That is where I create amazing connections for either my podcast or my business. And I do the same on Facebook as well, funnily enough. It is a little bit more, it's kind of the place where you go to find the connections that you make on LinkedIn, for example. If you're also connected with them on Facebook, that's where their personal stuff is. So that's where you can connect with them almost human to human, if that makes sense. Whereas LinkedIn is very much connecting from a business to business perspective. And so I've kind of decided to go all in on LinkedIn and Facebook. Now, a lot of people are telling me I have to be on Twitter, which I'm like, maybe someday, once we've kind of mastered the likes of LinkedIn and Facebook, then maybe we'll go to Twitter. But notice that what I said, which is I'm focusing until I master. And that's the strategy. That's what the missing piece to all of this is, which is if you're going to be on social media, pick one, max two, and master it before you try to go on to another one or try to discover a new one and work it out.
Oh, yes, master one. And I think, again, you keep hitting on all these points that I think are main reasons for pod fade is that we try to be every place. This isn't working. Okay, we built it. We kind of focused on SEO, but not really. They're not coming. So, I'm going to call it spray and play. Let's throw the spaghetti at every single platform until it shows up. And I have to admit, when I started with CapShow, my spaghetti at the wall got a little bit heavier because there is so much that you can get from in there. So as somebody who uses CapShow, that gives us all of these different things, because I'm telling you, listeners, everything like LinkedIn articles, blog posts, newsletters. I was like, okay, I got a little overwhelmed in the beginning because I tried to implement it all. So for somebody who is maybe starting with CapShow, or maybe they're like, okay, I've heard like now I need to be on all these other platforms. Like, where do we even start from there?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so and I'm glad you asked that, because I know that this is a thing. We do provide so much, and we don't. The last thing that we want is for us to be involved in what I'm calling content vomit, where, because you can get so much now, it's just like, I'm just going to vomit all over the internet, um, and try to be everywhere, and that's not how it works. So we designed CapShow, yes, to give you a lot of things, but we're also hopefully quite intentional to say, do not use all of the things. Like, do not use it all. I'm giving you permission, full permission, to not use it all, because you need to know where you're at and what what you have good capacity for, and the resources for. Honestly, we're all at different stages. Even me, right? As someone who created CapShow, like, we are still, just as I said, we're only on 2 platforms. So we create content for 4 platforms: for Facebook, Instagram, for LinkedIn. Facebook, Instagram, we kind of combine them. LinkedIn, Captions, TikTok, and YouTube, and gosh, what's the other one? Twitter. And so CapShow creates those. But even me, as the founder, as a co-founder, like, we only use 2 of those platforms. We only use LinkedIn and Facebook, right? We're not on Twitter, and we're not on Shorts yet. But that's, like, I'm a prime example. Do not use all of the things. We are obviously a little bit more, I would say, ahead in terms of what we do. So we do blog posts, for example. We do LinkedIn newsletters, for example. But if you're not there yet, like, there is no reason for you to rush that, because, and we try to make this as easy as possible, but there is actually a lot of thought that has to go into even a blog post. So what we do, for example, is we make it easy by way of, hey, let's actually craft not only the blog post, but also give you the topic choices, because obviously, as we know, blog post is you do that to be discovered, and you be discovered through search, which is very much anchored on keywords and all the SEO fundamentals. And so what we do is we actually have the smarts in there that will pick out what topics it is that you spoke about in the episode, so that you can really anchor CapShow into one. Because again, SEO is all about focusing on one topic at a time. Like, the machines have to be able to know specifically what it is that you're trying to say, and who you're trying to say it to. And so we make that part relatively simple. But what we don't do, again, yet, is are the things that actually bring a blog post to life. We create the words, yes, but the rich media part of it, and all of the backlinking, and that has to go in either inbound or outbound. Like, these are SEO fundamentals that CapShow doesn't do. And so if you're not there yet, if you're not at the point where you know about these fundamentals, and you don't have the bandwidth or the time or the resource or the team that can help to uplift your blog post in that way, then don't do them. Like, just don't. That's my really simple answer. Focus on, especially if you're new, like, one thing at a time. And that's what and trust me, I get it, right? Like, I talk about this, like, I'm like, oh, this is so easy. It's not. Someone who definitely has shiny object syndrome. I'm a recovering, like, shiny object syndrome. I also did all the things. So if you are new to podcasting, you're 5 episodes in, you're 10 episodes in, even you're 20 episodes in, just focus on your podcast. So just focus on being really consistent with recording. Focus on, coming up. And again, you can still use CapShow to create your titles and your show notes, or your player description and your podcast website content. Just focus on those. Like, that's it. That's why that's in what we call our starter plan, because that is, if you can get consistent at just doing that, you're going to have such a great platform to then leap, to up level from. So just be consistent doing that. And then you start to think about, okay, well, I have this podcast going. Yeah, I might not have any listeners, or very few, Now, how can I start to actually get the word out there? How can I start to create awareness? Okay, social media, focus on one platform, right? Because social media is great from an awareness perspective. Now, it will not get you direct listens. It will not I shouldn't say it will not. It's highly unlikely that your podcast is going to blow up from social media. You will get a trickle. Like I got a trickle of people who would DM me and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to listen to this episode. It looks so good." But how I would frame social media is use it just to create awareness, just to let people who happen to stumble on upon your post know that you have a podcast. Will they do anything about it? Probably not. But the more that they know about it, and when they're suddenly thinking, "Oh my gosh, I need to learn how I feel like I'm struggling with my podcast and I don't know whether this thing is worth it." I know that Jen has a podcast that's about pod fading. Hey, let me listen to that now, right? Like that's kind of how I see social media. So when you are ready to then kind of pick one platform and just create awareness on that one platform. And then, all right, cool, you've got that going. Awesome. Now you can go one of a couple of ways. Either you can keep going, if you love social media, then you can, choose another platform. But what I would highly actually recommend is that you start to really hone in on your email. Build an email list and start to nurture them. And your podcast content is such an amazing way to nurture your email list. Like literally, if you have nothing else to talk about, you can talk about what it is that you spoke about on your podcast. And if that goes out weekly, then you have a way to consistently you have a reason to consistently email your email list that you're growing. And, we can talk a lot about how to grow email lists and stuff like that. But anyway, there's so many, but that's the next thing. And then you go on to the next thing, which might be, another social media platform. Or if you're like, yep, I'm just killing it on one social media platform. Now I want to really hone in on search. Because by the way, like social media and search are, I see it very differently. Social media is very much of a discovery based platform, and discovery by way of people they're killing time, right? They're scrolling. And if they happen to come across a post or something that interrupts a pattern and they're like, "Oh, let me read about that more. Let me see." Awesome. But they're just discovering. Whereas search is very intentionally like people are going onto a Google or they're going onto a Pinterest or they're going onto a YouTube to actually search something. And so I always I recommend become a master in one discovery-based platform, so one social media platform, and become a master at one search-based platform. So either, I always say Google because Google is Google. But if it's not Google, then is it Pinterest or is it YouTube? Become a master at one each in those and then start to broaden out. So I know that I don't know if that quite answered. That was, I just needed to get that all out of my head.
No, I think it did answer the question because there is so much out there and there's so much. Like one of the things I'm frustrated with in the industry is that we're told to do all the things.
Yeah.
And there aren't enough people out there saying, slow your roll, one thing at a time, master the one thing. I think you're the first person that I've interviewed that said, for the first 20 episodes, just focus on your podcast.
Yeah.
There are so many people saying launch, and I want you on a blog. I want you doing newsletters. I want you on social media promoting this. Like, it's overwhelming from day one. Of course, we have a 90% fail rate.
Yeah, 100%. And I know why people are saying that. And it's taken me a long time to get over this as well. They say that because obviously we want people to succeed in podcasting. The only way that people can succeed in podcasting is if they can see that, again, they're making progress or their listeners are growing, etc. And so it's like, yeah, be on all these things because these are the things that collectively will help you get the word out there. But, and that's like, if you're going to get into podcasting, you've got to set your expectations, I guess I should say. Podcasting is not going to be the answer to instant growth and revenue and, explosion income. It's just not. I thought it was going to be when I first started my podcast, and it wasn't. It really, really wasn't. It is hands down the best way to find your voice, to hone your message, to anchor all of your other content eventually, to nurture your audience, so that they come to know, like, and trust you, so that it's easy for them to say yes when you make a pitch. It's the best way to create relationships. It's the best way to get away. Like, it is literally out of everything I've tried, podcasting is the best medium to literally grow your audience and grow your business. But it is not a direct, linear, straight path from I'm going to launch a podcast and I'm going to make $1 million in my business. Like, that is not how it works. And the reason why people say you've got to do all the things is because they're trying to sell the dream, right? They're trying to sell, hey, launch a podcast and you're going to make $1 million, or maybe not as crudely as that, but something close to that. And that's not realistic. The realistic thing is you've got to know what it is, or like why you're getting into podcasting. Some people are like, they have very specific strategies. I'm going to get into podcasting because I'm just going to interview guests who are going to become clients of my service. Awesome. Okay. Well, at least you know what it is that you're doing podcasting for. You set expectations around that. If you're doing it that way, you're just trying to find guests that fit your target audience, or your target client, and you don't care about downloads, like, literally, because it doesn't matter, because your whole strategy is around trying to get your guests to buy your thing. Or some people I want to be able to use my podcast to grow, to build an audience on there. Awesome. In this case, you do care about downloads. But that, as we know, building audience on any platform is a slow burn, and especially on a platform where you are demanding 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up to an hour of someone's time. Like, that's a way bigger barrier to jump. But just think about it. When you get people to jump that barrier, can you just imagine how much stickier they are to you than if someone was was a follower of you on TikTok, where you're just putting out 15-second, 30-second, 60-second things, right? Because they've jumped through a hoop like that. So this is like, I'm so passionate about podcasting, but I also know the drawbacks of it because I've been through it all. You said, Jen, I think I've launched 5, 6 different podcasts, and yeah, you can tell that, I've got one going right now. So I think we just have to be really realistic when we talk about podcasting and the time frames and the results that it's going to get us. We have to be really clear about what it is that we want out of the podcast, first of all. And then if that's the case, okay, cool. What are the metrics that are important to us, and what is the realistic time frame that we can actually achieve those in? That's actually a really important almost decision that you have to make before you even start a podcast.
Oh, I'm like, mic drop right there. Like, there's 2 things in there that come to mind. One is like knowing your why. And like you said, it might just be, you don't care if there's enough numbers. They're coming in, they're interviewing, you're pitching to them at the end. And it's like a sales call, but way easier to say, hey, be on my podcast than, hey, let's have a discovery call. Way easier, but also a lot more work because you have to produce the episode and put it out.
Yes.
So don't forget that part. And the other part is like getting sticky. So yeah, these other platforms, they're going to zone out.
Yeah.
Podcast, when I look at it and I'm like, oh, I only have, 100 listeners. It's like, holy crap, I have 100 listeners that are coming back every week listening to me preach or my guests preach for 15 to 30 minutes. No like trust. Skyrocket.
100%. And we forget about that, right? We look at those numbers and it's like 100, but someone, I think it was Brian Belletta, he was like, just picture those 100 people in a room. Like, that is a lot of people who are listening to you week in and week out. Like, we forget that sometimes. It's like 100 sometimes feels like a number, but behind that, each number is a person, is literally a person who's giving you their attention. And I think that we lose sight of that, which is a shame, because that is who, at the end of the day, we need to be creating this for. Again, back to depending on your goal. And I think a lot of us are doing it in order to build an audience. And if that's the case, then even if you have one listener, that's one person who is giving you their time and their attention. That is so valuable. So, like, don't get discouraged from that. That should actually encourage you. That should actually spur you on to be like, how can I make this one person such a raving fan of what it is that I do that they are 100% going to be talking to others about it? That's it. And that's how you grow.
Yeah. Oh. So what do you think the biggest reason for pod fade is?
I think there's a lot of it. It depends on the person. I do think that a lot of people don't really know what their goal was getting into podcasting. Either they were kind of sold on a dream, or they were just like, well, I'm seeing other people in my industry or in my niche, they have a podcast, so I guess I'll start one, but they don't know why it is that they're, and because of the fact that a podcast does take time. It takes time. Like, I love my podcast, but do you know the number of times I'm like, oh my gosh, I really just don't feel like doing, scripting an episode and recording it. And like, it's a lot of time and headspace and bandwidth, and you just have to be. And so, but the thing that I find, I love my podcast, and I know that I have really awesome listeners at the other side of it and really awesome audience. And I would never want to let them down. And so I think, to go back to your question, why the pod fade? I think it's expectations about what it is that a podcast, like, and not knowing the outcome that they want from it, and just getting themselves overwhelmed with all the things when you don't need to. And that's why just start with the basics, master it, get comfortable with it, or, outsource it. And then move, and then go to the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. Do not try to do all the things at once.
Yes. We'll keep going back to that. Don't do all the things at once. When you join CapShow, don't try to use all the features at once. I love, that was one thing. I was like, but it's all here for me.
Yeah.
I know I specifically was told not to use all of it, but I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to see what happens. Guys, don't do it. Like, it's magical and it's coming, but
yes,
let yourself be really good at the one thing.
Yes, 100%.
Oh, and the other thing that you always talk about that I have to throw in here, and because you said the word sticky, I'm like, reminded me, is these honey traps. So now we have we have people coming in every week. Well, we want to create these, I love calling them honey traps because I just think of like this cute little bear, and I'm like, yeah, all the honey. Yeah. But I want to talk about a little bit of like, what is a honey trap in our content for our podcast?
For sure. Yes. So, yes, I call them content honey traps, which, by the way, are embedded inside of CapShow. So I'll tell you sort of what they do, what they're used for, what they're designed for, and where we use them inside CapShow. But okay, what they do, like, very simply, is it's a way to create curiosity. So another not as fun name for it are hooks, for example. We want to be throwing hooks out. Now, why do we want to do that? And this is a little bit more advanced. So again, if you're just starting with just focus on just recording and getting your podcast out there. And then this is something that, because it takes practice to actually incorporate content honey traps into either your episodes or your content. So the way that I think about it, I think of everything almost like a funnel or a journey, depending on how you want to think about it. So at every step of the way, you need to be having your audience or someone do just the next thing. So, for example, let's say that the perfect journey was that someone would see a post on social media and they would then click in to listen to your episode. And from that episode, they would then, go onto your email list. And then from there, they would find your blog post, whatever it is, right? Like, whatever that perfect journey looks like for you. If you think about it at each step, let's say the very beginning, social media to your podcast. Now, I already said this doesn't work, but I'm just going to talk about this example anyway. You want to be creating so much curiosity in your social media post that people feel compelled to want to listen to your podcast episode. They feel compelled to do the next thing in your journey. Okay, so if that next thing is to listen to your podcast episode, how can you create so much curiosity? Because curiosity is the only thing that will move a person to action. Once you open a loop, we're human. Like, once you open a loop with us, we got to close that thing, right? Like that's what I did with you, Jen. Like with CapShow, I opened so many loops for you where I was like, you were like, I can do blog posts now and I can do LinkedIn. Like there were so many loops and you had to close them all until you realized that closing them all meant, that you were just sinking, right? But that's just a natural human thing that we do. When things are open for us, we need to close them. So how can you strategically open a loop for your audience so that they need to close it by doing the next thing? And that's the core of what content honey traps are, right? Opening that loop. And so we have like 8 mental models that I kind of created. I mean, they're not, I just pulled them together. Like, I mean, one is very much a known one, which is a cliffhanger, right? We all know that cliffhangers are so good at opening that loop that we have to close it. That's why like so profit. Oh my gosh, when I was younger, I used to be addicted to the Bold and Beautiful because of literally every day it would open a loop for me. I'm like, I need to know what's going to happen with Ridge and Brook next. I need to, right? Like, it's just all like, that's why those are so successful, because of things like the cliffhanger. And so there's 7 other mental models. Now if you want to know about them, I do talk about them on my podcast, on the Grow My Podcast show. So you could even just start, like literally I talk about them in episode 1 and episode 2. So you can start there. Or from a content perspective, that we've actually built those mental models into CapShow so that for your written content, you actually don't have to worry about them. You can just choose the one that you like the best and go with that.
Yes. I'm like, and there's another thing that I've been using CapShow for, which I don't know if anybody's ever told you, is that I have you do the interview or the meat of my episode, and then I pick my honey trap, and then I make that my hook for my episode.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so then you record something like to then edit in. Yeah, amazing. I love that. Okay.
Yeah, so I have a honey trap now, then my intro, and it always comes from something that CapShow has spit out. So it's also taken that piece out of trying to come up with that catchy cliffhanger. You gotta listen.
Yes.
So that's why I appreciate that you guys, you've spent the time with your team. Like, what does a podcast really need? Like, you're not just thinking about it as, oh, here's this basic overview, here's this basic thing. Like, beyond that, like, what is the journey? What is the experience? How can we bring them in? And that's why I'm always like, seriously, if you guys are not in love with CapShow already, you've got to go try it.
Oh, thank you. You're amazing. Yeah, I think that is a big difference about, because we are marketers. Like me, Bonner, Ash, like the co-founders of CapShow, we're all marketers. That's how we think. And so it just wouldn't even make sense for us to create a product that didn't solve that problem. I don't even know how others do it, to be honest. I just can't think that way. Yeah.
It's terrible, so it's okay.
Awesome.
Like, you guys have definitely figured it out.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you. And I'll make sure that all those links for all those episodes, because I mean, like, yes, go binge your show. Like, you've got an amazing book that I read actually on my way over, where I got to meet you in person.
Oh,
CapShow is the most amazing thing. But I want to know, what is your ingredient or ingredients that you want to add to the cure for pod fade?
Okay, well, CapShow for sure. That's, I mean, do you need anything else? Yeah. Number 1 is CapShow. I think I spoke through a lot. Like, number 2 is just knowing your goal. Like, know what you want out of your podcast, and then set the right expectations. I mean, I could go on. Like, there's so many things I talk like that I could, but I think if that's where people are starting, that's what, like, set your expectations. That, you know, everything that we stop or even start is because of what we think that we can get out of it. So start because you know that the podcast is going to just do absolute wonders for you, and it does, and it will. But also go into it knowing at what time, like what it takes to get there. So set your expectations and don't stop because you haven't reached that goal yet. You just iterate, just tweak a little bit, just, you know, try something different, because I know firsthand, and I know Jen knows, and a lot of people in the podcasting community knows how powerful podcasts can be. It comes down to what it is that you want out of it.
Yeah. And what's the biggest impact a podcast has made on your life?
Oh, it's hard to put. Okay, so probably the biggest impact, I mean, apart from being able to grow my business, is probably the people that you get to meet through podcasting. And not just, I mean, Jen and I met in person at actual events, like podcasting events. That's awesome. But just by having your own stage in a podcast means that you already open up doors that would never have been able to be opened up for you before. And so think about it even in that way. Like sometimes I'll speak to people who don't really know what their goal is. And I'm like, well, if this is important to you, as in if this particular thing, like creating a network is important to you, then hands down, like there's no better way than a podcast to do that. So just let that be your goal then. Just let that be, and don't worry about the fact that if your listeners aren't increasing, or like, don't even worry about that, because if your goal is just to be able to use a podcast to create network, then that's what is it. And is it doing it? Is it doing that for you? Yes. So yeah, that's been one of the biggest impact podcasting has made on me and my business for sure.
Oh, I love that. And it's big. It's like I said, podcasting is a way to build community, whether it's anything else, your network, your community, the people that are there cheering you on, the people you want to talk to. It's way less scary to ask them to talk to you, all the things.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for being here. We've dropped a lot of the names, but where would you like to send people to like come hang out with you?
Yeah, so if they want to try CapShow, we do have an extended free trial. So it's at freegift.capshow.com. So you can get an extended free trial, and we have a ton of bonuses around podcast discoverability as well in there. So definitely check that out. If you want to get in touch with me directly, then I am LinkedIn and Facebook are my main platforms, and I'm just Deirdre Shen. So my full name on those platforms.
And then I will definitely be linking up all the show notes and everything show notes, show description. What did we decide? I mean, like, this is a debate. Like, what did we call the thing that's below our episode?
Yeah. Well, I call that a description. Yeah. Player description and then podcast website content. I'm trying to move away from the words show notes because there's a lot of controversy about what that means. So yeah, I
had no idea that was a thing. So I appreciate that too. Shedding light on all sorts of things and making things easy. So yes. I appreciate you and thank you so much for this time. And I'm so excited to share your cure for pod fade.
Thanks so much for having me on, Jen. It's been an honor speaking to you on your podcast.
Is your mind blown too? I mean, seriously, Deirdre brought it. If you are struggling with throwing spaghetti at all the different walls, hoping something sticks to grow your show, let's have a conversation. Let's unmuddy the water and pick your 1 or 2 places for you to get really good at so that you can grow the show, because you truly have a mission and a story that needs a microphone and a legacy platform to back it. So if you want more and you need support with this, grab a 30-minute podcast CPR audit. This is where you get 30 minutes of my undivided attention to dig into your business and your podcast so that we can align your offers with your podcast and teach you how to sell through your episodes. If you are ready to take your podcast to a next level, grab your podcast CPR audit at podcastcpr.com. Again, this is 30 minutes of my time with you without an icky sales call on the end, because I know if I provide you value, you're going to want more. Head over to podcastcpr.com and I will see you soon. I look forward to seeing your podcast go up the charts and you create that tsunami of change that you desire.